Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of ASAP, your Afrikan Social Activism Playbook. I am one of your hosts, T, joined by my sister, Michelee. How are you doing today, sister?
I'm feeling pretty good right now. I just took my little herbs. I'm taking a cancer bush, little herbal solution, trying to keep my immune system in check. I do it, year round and stuff, but especially during these times, gotta stay extra secure.
Right,
So
yeah,
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 how
because
about you? How you keeping up, with your health
I'm,
and stuff?
I'm doing okay. I was feeling kind of down the other day, but got some medicine in me, and I've been trying to keep up on my vitamin C too and my vitamin B because I had some
Mhm.
nerve issues back when I was in Peru, and they told me that vitamin B and like those B vitamins keep you healthy. So
Right.
I've been trying to push that and make sure that I consistently take those. But I just wanted to let everybody know, like every day we jump on this show and we do a check in, and like we literally genuinely care about what's going on in each other's lives. It's not about, hey, how you doing? What's up? And it's just,
Yeah.
colloquial, just something to say to go along with the motions. Because in my time living in Africa, what I saw, and it was amazing, like you could have a business meeting and you're there to conduct an agreement. And before anybody starts talking business, they're going to ask you 50,000 questions about how you're doing, how is your health,
Right.
how did you sleep, how's your family, how's the home.
Mhm.
And it is important, and it's a cultural thing. And if you try to just go into talking business, people will stop and be like, no, we're not
Yeah.
moving on until I know how you're doing and that you genuinely are concerned with how I'm doing. So this is my sister. This is
Yeah.
somebody that I love, somebody that I care about. But we also have to look at one another that way, because we can
Mhm.
talk about all of these important topics we talk about. We can talk about all of the fun topics we talk about. But if we don't have a genuine care and love for one another, then none of it is going to be worth anything. We are just going
Yeah.
to be moving on with the motions, and people are going to be marching, people are going to be doing work. But if you don't actually care about each other, it's all going to be null and void in the end. What was your
Yeah.
experience like? And did you have that feedback? Because it was
Oh,
refreshing for me.
for sure. Like that's what I was telling you before when you were asking, my experience living, moving to Africa, for the first time. And it was just like that, just how it opened up the opportunity for me to make friends easier. The greetings you'll find, in the language, when you start to learn language, languages in different places, the greetings even have that, you know what I mean? Is a part of the greetings is asking, it's like a whole dialogue before you get into whatever, you about to talk about, whatever you about to ask for. When you go shopping, it's like, no, come sit down, have some tea. How your mama doing? How your daddy doing? How, how your cousins doing? How your kids doing? You gonna have some kids? You know what I mean? Like, well, not
Right.
quite that, but like, yeah, it's a genuine concern, and because it's kind of automatic for us. It's like a preset. I saw something. Well, people joke about it sometimes. We would just be like, how you doing? I'm okay, and you, okay, and you, and it's like, well, I
Right.
just asked you first, and then you asking me, now I'm asking you again. It's like we're not even thinking about it because we're not really
Exactly.
asking. Because really,
Hmm.
are you going to sit there and be like, oh, well, if you say no, you're not having a good day, or like, are we really
Right.
invested like that? And so it makes you, it's making me really be concerned, and ask, genuinely, how are you doing? And
Right.
so yeah, we should get into practice of doing that more often.
Yeah. And that's why we do it at the top of this show, trying to,
Mhm.
everything that we do here is for our sake, yes, but also for the audience, just to model behavior.
Mhm.
And hopefully it will carry over into your life as well as, the knowledge that we be kicking. So we're going to go
Mhm.
ahead and move into our straight truth, no chaser. And I don't
Ooh.
know if all of you have heard about what's happening, but there's some things happening in our beloved Zimbabwe.
Mhm.
And it has me very conflicted. And, because we're not there, and these are things that I'm hearing about, and I want to make sure that we have all the information, but I just wanted to present it to you guys to know what's happening. So if you guys aren't familiar, Zimbabwe was under the rule of President Robert Mugabe for decades. And from the outside looking in, as an African American, Robert Mugabe was doing a lot of cool things in Zimbabwe as it relates to, the invaders from Europe that came to, take over the land. And they had taken land and all types of things. And I was speaking to somebody from Zimbabwe who was saying that in their culture, they had places in Zimbabwe, like land that were so important culturally that they would never like use that land to live on, or they would never use that land to farm because it had other cultural significance or spiritual significances. And so when these invaders came, they had no respect to those boundaries. And so they would take the land and farm on it and live on land that had, higher significance to the actual native Zimbabweans. And he was telling me actually that his mother was buried on some sacred land and that he couldn't even visit her grave because some invaders had taken that land and started farming on it. And I was just, taken all the way aback from just the reality of what that would be like, having somebody come into your own, yard,
Right.
tell you and restrict you from practicing your traditional ways and even visiting your ancestors, and being able to conduct in the way that you guys set out in your tradition is just horrible. So Robert
Right.
Mugabe, what he did while in his time, he told all the white invaders who had those farmlands that they would have to leave, that they were taking the land back from all white
Right.
so-called settlers. And
Right.
it took even decades for them to actually acquiesce to that demand. But they finally did.
Mm-hmm.
And when they did leave, they, they poured acid in the soil to, make it not fertile. They poured cement down the plumbing of the housing so that people couldn't use it anymore, and ruined the pipes. And so now we have the current president of Zimbabwe that just proposed this, a $35 billion bond to pay, I mean, for lack of better terms, reparations to these
Reparations.
white farmers, these invaders who came and took the land without permission in the first place. But now they're getting paid while the actual people of Zimbabwe
The
barely have
native.
food to eat.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that? And how crazy is this?
I mean, I think that's crazy. I am a big, reparations supporter, for all of us who've been, under all of this. I think that's insane, first of all. And like, do they have 3.5 billion to be paying to them while it's so much work that needs to be done. I know anytime well, I have friends from Zimbabwe, and I'm listening to other people in
Mm-hmm.
that region, just talk about the issues and stuff, and just from what I've gathered also, it just seems to always be just a need for people to be taken care of, like the citizens, the natives. And so my first question is like, well, where is this money coming from? And like, how are you promising them that? And why are you promising them that? Like, it's
Right.
not unheard of. I mean, well, actually, it's just kind of bizarre, really, because it's a black, it's black leaders that's saying this, that's proposing this. We've seen, like, in America at the end of slavery, the white slave owners being paid reparations, for losing their
Right.
property. But this
Mm-hmm.
is really bizarre. Like, I mean, we're in 2020 and they're supposed to be, independent, but we're going to talk a little bit about that, about they're supposed to be independent, but still carrying on actions like this. I mean, this is just kind of crazy. Like, I wonder what brought this about.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I'm gonna continue to dig. Like, this came across my purview a couple of days ago, and I was like, oh, we have to talk about it, and we just
Yeah.
have to introduce it to you guys. Like, the
Hmm.
details about how this is going to actually be conducted and everything is still formulating. Like, this is
Hmm.
like news. This is breaking,
Yeah.
especially breaking to us. And I wanted to make sure that we presented it to you guys before you heard it from CNN or anywhere else before it gets watered down. We want to,
Right.
and it's so reminiscent of so many other things that have happened to us in the past that we're going to definitely talk about later. But I just
Right.
wanted to make sure that, so 3.5 billion. Let's talk about how much money that is. And the I was reading an article that said Zimbabwe just barely paid off their debt to the World Bank that they've had for decades, and that they still owe money to other international banks for like health assistance and food assistance.
Mm.
So if you're
Hmm.
borrowing money to just eat, how is it fathomable for you to offer this amount of money or any money at all? Like you said, why are they paying it at all? And that begs to question,
Right.
is this them being forced? Do they have some type of stranglehold on the current president? Like,
Right.
they could not wait to get Mugabe out of office, and they
Right.
forced him out of office in 2017. And
Hmm.
he's passed away now, but it's like, what do they have on this current president? Because I was also
Right.
reading some other things about Zimbabwe, because I've heard the hashtag Zimbabwean lives matter, right? Ice Cube and other black celebrities have started sharing that because they're protesting how bad the economy is doing. Now, this is
Hmm.
happening in the same week that this
Right.
information about white people getting reparations
Reparation.
from Zimbabwe,
Yeah.
while
When you
people in
can't even feed your
Zimbabwe
people.
are
Yeah.
protesting about the economy. So there
Hmm.
is a clear imbalance here. There's something afoot. And
Right.
we're going to keep digging, and we just wanted to make sure that we brought it to your attention. But this is definitely not going to be the last time that we talk about it, because the more we get information on it, the more we'll speak on it. And even if you guys, as the audience,
Right.
if you find any information, leave it in the comments. Leave it in the comments of the lives that we do. Leave it in the comments of, the rewatch on YouTube
Hmm.
and Facebook. Just let us know any information that you may have, and please do the research. This
Right.
is the Afrikan Social Activism Playbook. So we
Hmm.
are not only taking plays from the past, but we're developing new plays that need
Right.
to be addressed, because what we have not seen done in the past is a successful, sustainable Pan African movement. We've
Hmm.
had Pan African movements. We've had things in the past that have shown the power of what happens when the African diaspora actually comes together. But what we
Right.
haven't seen is it be sustained for generations. How do we make sure that that momentum that's built in one generation, from African Americans fighting against apartheid like it's our
Hmm.
own, because it is, how
Right.
do we keep that momentum from the 80s and the 90s into the 2000s? You know what I
Right.
mean? Where we have to keep rebuilding it. How do we keep the Jomo Kenyatta and Kwame Nkrumah? They
Hmm.
stated how they had been influenced by seeing
Right.
the African American struggle against um, just Jim Crow and
Hmm.
racism and discrimination here in the United States. They saw our fight and were encouraged to begin the independence movement in
Yep.
Africa.
Right.
So we saw
And,
those elements happen. Go ahead.
hmm. No, yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, because we constantly pull inspiration from each other, and like
Right.
that energy, that ball of energy is gonna keep growing, you know, if you just keep it rolling though. Like we even when we see, like you just mentioned, like when Ghana gained its independence, Kwame Nkrumah, you know, and even looking at their flag, the Black Star came from inspiration from Marcus Garvey's, you know, Black Star line, you know, and we can constantly, and look, that was only, we're going to get into talking about just you know, the independence of these countries and stuff, but it hasn't been that long, you know, and so it is a learning process, even for us, thinking about us and our history in America as Black people, as African people in America, is like, it hasn't been that long. When we actually look at the calendar, you know, look at the timeline of events, it hasn't been that long since we've gotten freedom, since we've gotten certain rights, you know, and access to certain spaces and opportunities. And so it is a growing process, but we need to understand, you know, and relearn how to, you know, to lean on each other and, you know, to keep the ball moving. And how do we establish that unity? Mm-hmm.
Establish it, but maintain it as well. Because I love what you just said about the flag of Ghana. So it's a Black Star. It takes from.
I think he'll be back in. But yeah, I mean, until he comes back in, yeah, we need to definitely figure out how to maintain that unity. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Okay, go ahead, pick it up.
So that Black Star taken from Marcus Garvey's influence, right? And we know that Marcus Garvey was a Pan-Africanist, but he was from Jamaica. He came to America to lead a Black movement. That's Diaspora. Then you have Kwame Nkrumah taking that influence from a Jamaican who did work in America, taking it back to fight for independence, and taking on the Garvey idea of what Africa and what it represented and putting it on an actual flag on the continent. That type of connection is what we're trying to build, what we're trying to keep up. But the thing is, it was years between Garvey's influence in like the late 20s, the 30s, into a little bit of the 40s before like even the Black Panthers and those Black Power organizations picked it back up in like the 70s and on into the 80s, and then it went away again. And so we have to figure out, how do we keep that momentum up? How do we make sure that we influence the next generation as they're growing up so that they don't reject it or they don't lose it in some way that we keep, you know, falling into this same cycle. So that these are the plays that we're trying to develop in this playbook as well. Like, how do we make sure, you know, a play like in basketball, the sky hook, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, his sky hook, you couldn't block it. There was no way for anybody to defend it because it was almost like a perfect shot. We need that. We need that type of play in our playbook where we can always, you know, when everything hits the fan, okay, pass the ball to him, he got it. We're gonna score. And we need those types of activities in everything that we do. So it's just funny that we talked about the influence and how close it is in history that Africa, these African countries have been independent. So our highlight reel today is not one person, it's not one organization, it's the entire African independence movement. And we say African, and I always say this, African with a K, because it's talking about the continent, but as well as the diaspora. So I'm going to start all the way back in the 1800s while, you know, enslavement was still popping in the Western Hemisphere. And we're going to talk about a little island called Haiti and how they fearlessly and courageously fought for their freedom. And those of you who don't know, the Haitian Revolution was, from what I've read, the only successful slave revolt.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they put their lives on the line. And one of the things that I love about what they did and what they said in the aftermath of the Haitian Revolution, when they beat France, when they beat their navy, when they beat their army with machetes and scraps and rocks, and we we practiced guerrilla warfare because we knew the land. They beat the French army, Napoleon's
Mm-hmm.
army. But they said, when we claim freedom of this land, this is going to be a sovereign nation built for all Africans. Anybody who comes
Right.
here who is enslaved from anywhere will be free. So they already had that mindset of, we're not just doing this for our own sake. We are fighting for the
Right.
freedom of all of our brothers and sisters that have been, traumatized through this transatlantic experience. And
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the reasons that Haiti is in the position that it is today, because they spoke up on our behalf. And Europe understood that Haiti existing was a threat to their economy, was a threat to their way of life. Like, if the enslaved people who were under Spanish rule, if the enslaved people who were still under English rule saw Haiti and were inspired by them, then they all would be, in danger, like in real
Right.
life threatening danger as well as financial danger.
Mm-hmm. For
What's your
sure.
take?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. And pointing out that the guerrilla warfare, using whatever you had. Like, I know, our army, we're not armed as, as much as you are, but they knew it, they felt it, they wanted it really bad. And, so they fought back with all they had. And it made me think about also, the one of the only African countries that didn't get officially colonized. Ethiopia. I learned while I was living there the history in the Battle of Adwa was one of the when they fought off the Italians, and I was learning
Mm-hmm.
there, like, they were up there, um with their sticks and rocks and whatever they had, because they weren't armored, like the Europeans that they were fighting against, but they used whatever they had to fight them off as well. So yeah, you got to have that heart and the will.
Right. And so that was, all the way back in the 1800s. And I want you guys to really look into the Haitian Revolution. And of course, those of you who did learn about it probably somewhere in school, somewhere down the timeline, you probably heard about Toussaint L'Ouverture, but you had
Hmm.
Toussaint L'Ouverture, you had Boukman, you had Makandal, you had all of these people who were not only just military minds, but spiritual minds. They had
Right.
different levels of leaders who were inspiring people to actually fight for something. And they would rather live, they would rather die free than live enslaved.
Yep.
And that was what they were all about. And just picture this about just the Haitian Revolution and the way that it was presented to me when I learned about it. So we all know how the transatlantic experience went. They took African people from different ethnic groups, from different countries, from different parts of the continent, and put us all on the same ship. And then, even when we got to the places where, our so-called last destinations, we were getting sold back and forth from islands to, some enslaved from the US might get sold to Jamaica, some might get sold to Haiti, and be back and forth and experiencing all of those systems, which is why they even had the mindset of speaking to not just the Africans who were enslaved in Haiti. They wanted to
Right.
speak freedom to everybody. But
Hmm.
just the language barrier of, and the cultural barriers and the custom barriers that existed on the island itself between the different groups of black people, they got past that. They saw,
True.
no, forget you're Yoruba, I'm Igbo,
Mm-hmm.
I'm Manding, I'm this. Right now, we're together, and
Mm-hmm.
we're going to be together to overthrow this injustice that's happening to us, and we're going to make sure that we love and care about each other, and we'd rather come together and kind of fuse our customs together and figure something new out than to be fighting amongst ourselves while there is such a looming larger threat in play. So we had the wherewithal to see that and the guidance to work together beyond these superficial divisions. And it's something we could definitely learn from today. But
Right.
that's the Haiti example, right? So you fast forward all the way from the mid, like early 1800s, like the 1800s, all the way to the 1950s when you get Jomo Kenyatta and Kwame Nkrumah being educated here and then going back to Africa
Right.
to gain independence in Ghana in 57, and then Kenya got theirs in 64, and then a lot of other countries followed in between around
Right.
like
Actually,
1960.
yeah, it's interesting because after you see Kwame Nkrumah gain independence for Ghana in 57, in 1960, the year 1960 alone, 17 African countries gained their independence. So that
Mm-hmm.
was that ball, that ball moving, and they got the inspiration and said, like, what is the point of standing back when you can and you're able to, what I mean, rely on not just the inspiration, but if we can back up each other,
Mm-hmm.
back each other up in
Right.
these situations, you know what I mean? Lean on each other. You have somebody else to call to. I mean, to call on, for help and support. So yeah, that's crazy that in 1960, like how many of our parents or grandparents were alive then, and this
Right.
is just so recent.
And it because when we think about certain things and when we look at history, like we
Mm-hmm.
were talking about yesterday, we don't always learn history in the chronological order or
Mm-hmm.
able to appreciate just how much time has passed, or in
Right.
some cases like the one we're talking about, how little time has passed.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
we live in a time period where we know people who are older than the independence of all of the African nations that we just talked about.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like my auntie is older than Ghana, Guinea. You know what I mean? These countries are babies in
Right.
the context of being a nation and being independent and being sovereign, and what does that mean,
Right.
especially, and not just a country just developing, like people found some land and actually developed. These are
Right.
countries that had to come up out of colonization. So they
For
had to
sure.
come out of a mentality of being under somebody else's rule, and being educated to a point of thinking that the only valid education comes from somebody outside of your own people.
Right, right. So with that though, I've often I have to ask this question. Like I had to ask it to myself and I asked to other people because a lot of times we get frustrated with how these countries and different people are, how they're progressing, and we have to really realize that since they are so new in establishing themselves, shaking off the colonizers, which in a lot of cases the colonizers are still there. They still,
Mm-hmm.
they still have their hand in their pockets, or whatever. We have to realize, like, it will also take time to develop, so we have to be patient and understanding, what I mean, the how they're moving along. However, we need to keep our eyes on the prize, and I'm always thinking about how a lot of criticism coming from like leaders that we see now in some countries that where majority of the population are impoverished, and you
Mm-hmm.
see leaders, they get frustrated with their leaders because they're their offspring is out chilling in Europe and driving fancy cars and doing this and that. And so I see it, they fall under a lot of criticism because it's like, well, why are you trying to keep up with the Joneses? We got business to take care of. right here. We have to, it's about those sacrifices. If we
Right.
can't be up here trying to buy Birkin bags when we need to be trying to buy up the block. You know what I mean? It's that
Mm-hmm.
same type of like prioritizing that we need to do. And that applies to the, you know, leaders of these countries when they're very new and they need to be establishing a foundation, you know, to sustain themselves without the colonizers. You know, because if you're gonna try to live like that, if you're gonna try to keep up with Europe and America and this and that, you're not gonna get to where you need to be to sustain. You know what I mean? And then at the same time, linking it back to us throughout the diaspora, we get caught up in trying to have what so and so has, but we have things that we need to get established for ourselves to be able to, you know, to get to that level, you know, to sustain ourselves. And yeah, it's about priorities and
And it's
sacrifice.
definitely that. And then we also, like you alluded to earlier, have to be patient
Mm-hmm.
because, like I said, we have to remember, like, a lot of people try to compare US gaining their independence from
Right.
their colonizer.
Mm-hmm.
The US was technically a colony of England,
Right.
but they were the Englishmen.
Right. It
And
was them.
so, okay, they fought a war against themselves,
Right.
against their, you know, their daddy, and they
Mm-hmm.
just pretty much just had a temper tantrum. It was like, I don't want to
Exactly.
pay you anymore. And then
Exactly.
so they got free, but even before they gained their independence, they still had our free labor that was
Mm-hmm.
feeding the economy's growth much at a faster rate. The US is a, you know, a country on steroids. You cannot
Right.
compare a country that had free labor for 200 plus years of its existence to
Mm-hmm.
a country that was coming out of true colonization from a foreign entity that had absolutely no love for it, no
Right.
appreciation for the customs or culture or the people itself or the land. They
Mm-hmm.
just came to pillage and rape, right?
Right.
So because I've heard a lot of people. I remember being in Peace Corps, and I was like hearing some of the people who were in Peace Corps with me. You know, they were, you know, of European descent, and they didn't know much, but they were kind of like, we were in Guinea, West Africa, and they were complaining about like the development of Guinea and trying to compare it to U.S. development. And we know that the
Right.
U.S. is just a little bit over 200 years old.
Right.
Um, but you have that steroid boost, plus they had help. So
Mm-hmm.
the French actually wanted the US to gain independence so that they can get an upper hand on the British. So they
Yeah.
had European aid as well as that free labor market.
Yeah.
That's steroids upon steroids. When you
Mm-hmm.
look at a country like Haiti, who was a threat to all European powers, who did they have to do commerce with at the
Right.
beginning as they developed?
You
How
didn't
does a
have that trust
country,
fund. Yeah, you didn't have a trust fund. You know, you didn't have that backup. Yeah. So
if you know anything about
that's
global
problematic.
economics, if there's no import export trade, there is
Mm-hmm.
no there is no economy. There's no market. You need foreign trade in order to do that. And what European country in the early 1800s was willing to work with people who had just defeated, you know, their primary source of income? Like enslavement was the market, right? So you have this group of former enslaved people, and you're going to do business with them, and then
Right.
look to Africa. Africa in the early 1800s, most of our nations were still being colonized as well.
Right.
So they weren't in any position to aid Haiti. So then
Mm-hmm.
fast forward to the African independence movement of Ghana, of Kenya, of Guinea, of all of these places. And who did they have to turn to get any aid? We have
Right.
all of the natural resources in the world, but if we
Right.
can't get a partner to sit down at the table as equals and come up with a fair trade agreement, then we're going to be on in the hole from the beginning. So we're starting at negative 100.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be
So
fine if we could
you're not
even
even
start
at
at zero.
ground level. You know
We're
what I
not
mean? We
even
have
at
to
zero.
like you got to dig yourself out of the hole and then you have to start to lay your foundation, you know what I mean, and then build up on that. But if you don't have that, it's going to take even longer. So, but
And then
that just leaves me, asking, like, is it possible? And what happens? Okay, I was going to ask, is it possible to first, my question is it going to be possible to develop without the colonizers? You know what I mean? When we look at the troubles that people have throughout history, we look
I
at a
think
lot of these.
I
Hmm.
think the only way to develop is without the colonizers.
Hmm.
We have
And which
to.
ways? Tell me, how do you think? Like, in what ways do you think?
So for me, just in the education that I have and the experience that I have on the continent, one of the
Hmm.
examples is like in Guinea, we grow rice. There are fields of natural grown rice in Guinea. It's a natural resource, it's already there. And they have
Right.
the land allotted to do it, but they will take foreign aid rice that has been bleached and not as healthy
Yeah.
and actually costs much more to buy from these other countries because they think it is better. So that
Right.
colonized mindset of if it comes outside of where we are, it is better.
Right.
That type of mindset is still there. So even if you just take the elements of the resources that you already have and benefit from that, even just using it within your own borders, that
Hmm.
will help so much more.
Right.
And small little elements like that, and making sure that we educate people on how to build and create infrastructure so we don't have to lean on the Chinese and they take much more than they actually offer, or we have to lean on the French, or we have to lean on our ex-colonizers, because they're going to make sure that it's not a reciprocal offer.
Oh, for sure. You're gonna be in debt. It's not gonna be a handout. It's not gonna be, you know what I mean? It's not gonna be like you're giving an upper hand. You're gonna be in debt. But it makes me think about, like, we were just talking about Jomo Kenyatta and
Mm-hmm.
how, basically, and you mentioned like Robert Mugabe and stuff, and how basically they were telling people to get out. But go back to Jomo Kenyatta, and like how, when basically he was telling him, no, telling them you gotta go, but look at how those same people, they will do whatever they can. You talked about them in before in Zimbabwe, how those white settlers destroyed the land, you know what I mean, the pipes and stuff to ruin it for
Right.
people, who were supposed to get it when they were trying to take the land back. We look back at Jomo Kenyatta, and like, look at how they go back in. Well, before they even leave,
Right.
they'll try to destabilize as much as they can, because of course it's not going to be an easy, goodbye. They're going to fight their way out. You look at Patrice Lumumba, you look at, you know what I mean, and they cause all types of issues. And it's not, and the crazy thing about it is we see the unity between other European nations. Like when we look at the European Union, they
Mm-hmm.
can band together to accomplish goals. They might not like each other, you know what I mean,
Right.
like that, but they understand to achieve a common goal, which, and we look at like the scramble for Africa. And this is them, you know what I mean, playing this game. This is them playing a game amongst each other, but who are the pawns?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it's crazy though,
I
but
mean,
we have to
they had
be
a
mindful
whole.
of them destabilizing, but are they're destabilizing as a result of us trying to take back, you know what I mean, what's ours, when we get that, when we are bold enough to tell them to get out and try to
Right.
do it on our own. They will come in with all of their tricks, you know what I mean, to destabilize you and make it harder for you to develop.
They had a whole Berlin conference about how they were going to divvy up Africa and
Hmm.
just draw these arbitrary borders that we still recognize today, which I really want us to stop. I
Right.
wish we could get to that point, but we have so much to do before we can even get
I
there.
know. I
But
know.
so I just want to do a review for the people watching. So our highlight reel is about our African independence movements and how influential they were, and how even they are, in a sense, a part of examples of the African diaspora actually coming together. You see the influence and how the mindset of those Haitians were when they fought that revolution and how they were diasporatic minded. You see the
Mm-hmm.
influence that Black America and our fight for freedom had on African leaders that went back home to initiate that freedom movement. And when Ghana got theirs, it sparked and ignited something throughout the rest of Africa. So that's
Right.
diaspora in itself, just the African nations on the continent being inspired by one another. Oh, we're fighting now? Okay, let's go. Let's get it. And
Mm-hmm.
we have to make sure that we continue to, inspire each other. And this is what we're trying to build with this network in African diaspora and the African Unity Initiative. It's about how much can inspiration and exposure to one another give you the will to fight and to
Exactly.
continue to stand up, because it's in us and we've seen it happen time and time again. But we move on from our highlight reel to our Monday morning quarterback, which is our 2020 vision of, okay, what has happened? What plays work? What didn't quite work? And so we had the independence movements, but they came at a price, and not
Yep.
just at the life of people who fought wars to gain independence. The price of freedom in the aftermath of independence was a heavy toll on all of us, and
Mm-hmm.
it's important for us to know what happened. So we started with Haiti, so we're gonna go back to Haiti. So what happened with Haiti? Haiti got their independence, and it pretty much crippled France's economy. If you know anything about how influential the Haitian Revolution was, the reason that Louisiana, Arkansas,
Right.
Mississippi, Missouri are a part of the United States of America today
They had
is
to pay that back.
is a part of the Haitian Revolution, because France had to sell, they needed money. So they had to
Mm-hmm.
sell the land that they held in North America to the United States to keep their economy going. So the United States benefited from that, and they
Yep.
got to expand in their so-called manifest destiny. And then France, the sugar cane from Haiti alone was one of the top exports that France had. And when they
Mm-hmm.
lost access to that sugar cane, it crippled their economy. And they
Right.
had to make sure that so much was done, so much so that they were like, you know what? We're going to go back to Haiti and make them pay reparations for
Yep.
gaining their freedom. So between in 1825, France surrounded the island of Haiti with their navy and said, "You're going to pay us, or else we're going to destabilize your economy and much more than it already is." They were already a very, very new nation that couldn't find any
Mm-hmm.
trade partners.
Right.
So now they're being forced to pay $21 billion over a span of time to pay back their former oppressors. Now, they fought for their freedom. And usually, if you know anything about war, the person who lost the war pays the reparations.
Right.
Germany, I remember Germany paying the Allied powers after World War I and World War II. I remember them suffering, the people who lost the war. But when you don't have any allies and when you don't have anyone to speak up on your behalf, you're at the
Mm-hmm.
behest of even the people who lost. And
And
so,
I'm sure they would have kept terrorizing them if they denied them. You know what I mean? So it's
right,
like they did they really have much of a choice
they
to,
did it.
to say, yeah.
And that's the thing. So you have from 1825 all the way to 1947 when they finally paid off the last of their so-called debt. And they
Mm-hmm.
actually had it on the books as a debt that Haiti owed them for gaining their own independence. I just sit and think about that for a minute and how insane that is. And so then, Michelee, you talked about, Jomo Kenyatta and what he went through, but you have Sekou Toure, first president
Mm-hmm.
of Guinea, my love, right? 1958, France comes to Sekou Toure and was like, you know what? Okay, y'all want y'all independence, but join this group of countries that we're gonna print y'all money for. We're gonna back the currency behind our system, and we're going to take a piece of it. And Sekou Touré said, no, I don't want any colonial ties to Guinea from this point forward. We are independent. And what did France do in return? Before they left, like you said before, they tore down the roads. They tore down the hospitals. They tore down the schools. They tore down everything that they had built during their time of colonizing Guinea, and made sure that all of the infrastructure that was there was gone. So they were like, okay, we're leaving with everything that we came with. And so it crippled and made them have to start, like we said, from -1. We can't even start from zero. Okay, you colonized us. You've benefited from 100% of all of our natural resources for how many or so ever years? 200 plus years of colonization. And now that we are ready to get our independence, you start us from before, lower than we were before you even came. Like, because if you know anything about pre-colonial Africa, we were doing just fine.
Right.
So don't let them fool you into thinking that Africa was just some
like they saved us. Because that's the narrative that they'll give, even like justifying anything. Oh, we're going in to help poor Africa. They needed help, these poor savages. You know what I mean? That's the narrative that they continue to tell, to justify all the things that they do, all the damage that they do. And it's just crazy because it's making you become dependent on them, and that's mentally first, without actually looking around and see, well, can we do this on our own?
I've heard African Americans ignorantly be appreciative of enslavement because Europeans saved us from Africa.
I'm telling you.
We don't know how many times, like we talked about yesterday about, maturity and being woke. And you have to be a mature, woke person to be able to hear such ignorance from your own people and not like punch somebody in the face. And it's like, okay, what's the best way to reach this person? Okay, is this even, beneficial to me to have this conversation right now? Do I just walk away? Do I just walk away? Do I just walk away? And it's like, but we understand what that miseducation is about. I always say miseducation is way more dangerous than not having education at all. Because if you're learning something for the first time, you're more likely to accept it. But if you're learning new information that is contrary to what you've already learned, you will be more skeptical. It's going to be more difficult for you to accept that new information than it would be if it was your first time learning anything at all. So, I mean, we wanted to do the Monday Morning Quarterback to show the examples of, so what happened after Sekou Touré did this in Guinea. So this is 1958, and Michelee just said in 1960, there are a slew of countries that get their independence. After they saw
in that 1 year.
After they saw what France did to Guinea, no other country supported not accepting the CFA. So all of these countries now, they pay France an annual debt just to have their own currency.
Yeah. How crazy is that?
France prints the money, and we're talking about Mali, we're talking about Senegal, we're talking about Togo, we're talking about Burkina Faso, on and on and on. Anybody that uses the CFA, and the funny thing is, when you go to these countries, like the CFA is worth more money than the Ghanaian franc. That's because it's backed on this system, but it's worth more money, technically. But France is getting more out of those CFAs because they actually bank off of it. And then they actually require them to keep 60% of their wealth in a French bank so that they can gain interest on it. And that these African countries can only spend 15% of their actual GDP. They only get 15% of their GDP to use toward like infrastructure and things like that to continue to move their country forward. So they are still colonized. These are not sovereign nations. They're sovereign in name. And we as African people, as a global African perspective that we're trying to develop, we have to know all of these details so we can do something about it. We are drawing up these plays. Like, we're presenting this information, and right now we're not claiming that we have all the answers. But by exposing this information to as many people as possible, we can get more people to come up with different plays so that we can interact them. Like I said, the social activism playbook is going to be a living document. We will come up with plays as we go along, and we will look back to find, okay, who did what and when. Okay, this was successful this for this amount of time, and what happened. Because we know about COINTELPRO, we know about and I just want to leave on this for the Monday Morning Quarterback. Any other country that tried to follow in the footsteps of Sekou Touré, because there were some, but very conveniently, there was a military coup that killed and replaced the president that bucked against France. And you can trace these military coups toward any other European colonized power in Africa. Like, every time you see a coup, don't just think and don't just listen to the news and say, "Oh man,
these ignorant people, they don't know how to get their act together." Yeah, that's what I'm saying though. But we have to. But that's the thing. When we start criticizing, and this is us. This is like Africans, wherever you are, and you looking at your people, wherever they are, wherever you are, and you you think to criticize them and their actions. You gotta dig and get to the root of the problem, dig up the roots, the root, and figure out what is going on, like who's involved, you know what I mean? Because it's going to be somebody behind it, most likely. We even, a lot of people talk about, like, puppets and stuff in governments, and but we always look at the face, look at who's the head of it. But we got to realize, like, it's always a reason behind it, and it's going to be, whether you look at, and we think about situations like Rwanda, for example, the massacre there, and it's like, the genocide there, and we have to look at who and what is behind it, because most of the time is not just those people who just can't get their act together. Of course, we're gonna have to look at personal accountability and stuff like that, but usually it's another driving force, and we can't be just criticizing the effect without looking at the cause, because and we won't be able to learn from it. We won't be able to see what caused it and how can we avoid this, this situation or these people. Like, what can we eliminate? That's why it's important to actually investigate and see what's at the root of the issue.
And I pulled this quote. It says, "Without Africa, France will slide down into the rank of a third world power." Now, this was said in 2008 by a former president of France, Jacques Chirac. He said this out of his own mouth. Like, they
2008
him saying this. This isn't that long ago, people. This is what I'm trying to say. Like, this timeline of when African people throughout the globe are talking about racism and talking about all the struggles that we have endured but are still enduring, understanding the length of time that we've been struggling. And then you have people that try to come up and tell us to get over it, or get past it. Get past what? It's still happening.
It's still happening.
There's nothing to get past until we acknowledge it and can say that it is happening and know what it is that we can do about it. And so what we're going to be doing is making sure that we acknowledge that, Africans throughout the world, when we come together, when we create the African Unity Initiative is something that you do when no one has to tell you to do it. It's something that you just do automatically. You don't do it after the milk has spilled on the ground. You sweep the floor and you mop it every other day because you just want your house to be clean. You don't need it to be dirty for you to clean it. We need
visibly dirty. Exactly.
Maintain our standards, and we need to set them so that we can get to a place where we are living on a level of just humans. Like, they dehumanize us constantly, and we have to make sure that we don't fall into the mindset of dehumanizing ourselves into believing every little, negative thing about ourselves and
Do
who is
you,
causing these conflicts. Go ahead.
yeah, do you think that a part of this, like, because I think there's like a an identity issue here, and I think when you look at, oppressed people, just globally, um, and looking at, like, people have been telling us who we are, who we're not, and this and that, and so we see like a lot of people wanting to separate,
Yeah.
and you see this like tribalism and whatever, like, no, I'm this, you're not a part of me, I'm not a part of you. And I think it's that part is also holding us back, and so like we focus on pan-africanism, and mostly because it's for our security. Like, yes, and we would love to have a good, great relationship with everybody. We think about like getting along together, like from a social aspect, but also think we got to think militarily a lot of times. It can't just be on some trivial, oh, well, we don't do it like this, or y'all don't do it like us. And so, how do we gain that, like, relearn that pride, or just learn how to have pride in ourselves, and um, see that connection, like that family connection with each other, and see each other as like
Right.
partners, to be able to lean on each
Yeah.
other, because I think it's too much of that tribalism going on to where we can't get along to achieve a common goal because we want to be so
Mhm.
separate. know?
Well, the way that I have been going about it is just a lot of it has to do with self-efficacy. A lot of it has
Mhm.
to do with not believing that we can accomplish certain things.
Yeah.
So in the work that we do, before we even um, present our communities that we work with about the whole, scope of the network of other African people in around the globe, we focus
Mhm.
in on their community and we show people that the ideas that you have in your head about the advancement of your community are worth something and can be turned into something. Like, seeing your idea come to life does something to a person. It
Yeah.
inspires you to do more. It
Mhm.
encourages you to be like, oh my God, I actually made an impact on my own community. How
Yeah.
much more can I do? You take the chains off of that person's brain. And then as a community, as a family unit of that, one place, they start to build those relationships. Then we start to slowly introduce the Pan-African aspect of it. We start to
Right.
say, so this project worked well in Sierra Leone. Well, Guinea is right above you. They're, the
Yeah.
same people, same pretty much land. The project that happens here could possibly be functioning there as well. And then we introduce those communities to one another, and then they
Mhm.
start to communicate, right? And then we do the same thing here in the US with cities here. Oh,
Right.
Chicago is doing this, New York is doing this, Atlanta is
Right.
doing that. Oh man, wow, that's a good idea. Oh, I'm inspired by what they're doing. Oh, they're consistent. Oh, they do this. I appreciate
Mhm.
that. And just that exposure to the fact that other people are doing work, even if it's
For
not like
sure.
we're taking on the same project, even if it's just, wow, I didn't realize that other people were active the way that I am. So it
Right.
inspires me to not give up. Like in the moments that you want to quit, in the moments that you get tired of being an activist, if you feel like
Mhm.
you're carrying the whole burden by yourself, then you will give up. But if you know that you're carrying that beautiful burden with other
Right.
people, then
Right.
you'll find a second wind. You'll
And
find a
we
new
do
strength.
get, yeah,
And
we do get worn out
right.
though when it's just us, when all of the weight is on your shoulders, and that's
Hmm.
something I even had to learn, in my personal life, is just when we can have other people to lean on, to depend on, you can stop and take a breath. You know what I mean? You can
Right.
get that energy again to keep going, because it does feel like you can feel defeated sometimes, because it's going to be hard work. Liberation is hard work. And I think sometimes we also look at modern times and we want to think that we can keep up with the modern things, but we have to, going back to what we were talking about before, sacrifice to be able to get to the point, because we had, like, we're still not done digging ourselves out of that hole. to be able to,
Mhm.
establish that foundation and build up on it. So we have to make those sacrifices. And like you said, with smaller communities, smaller pockets of people doing these things, it will empower others who are interested in also building up their small communities. And then we'll
Right.
see each other, you know what I mean? And then we can get to the level to where we can depend on each other, like from city to from neighborhood to this bigger city to, you know what I mean, to the whole state. And then, nationwide. That's how we can spread and inspire and empower each other.
And that's why I call this section the price of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom comes with a price. Like there's sacrifice that must be had. And just like yesterday when we talked about the bus boycott, that bus boycott in one city of Montgomery inspired and changed so much throughout the entire United States. So
And
when we
everybody benefited from it.
right, so when we start with these small communities, it's because you don't need everybody to do it all at once.
Yeah.
Focus on an area, curate a critical mass of people
That
that are
critical
going to
mass.
be focused in and determined, and make sure that actually are results oriented, because
Yeah,
sometimes 15 people is better than 50 to start, because
for
if you start with
sure.
50
Yeah.
people, that's 50 different personalities, 50 different brains, and
Yep.
everybody trying
When the
to
pull
get
direct
things
in that
going.
direction. Yeah. Hmm.
15 people can be curated to fall in line and say, okay, this is the goal. Okay, this is
Hmm.
how we're going to get there. And each of those 15 people get delegated their positions and they play their part, swimmingly. And
Yeah.
then you start to, once they set the standard, then you can accommodate 50, because
Yeah.
though once those other people come in, they just fall in line with the standard that's already been set, and now
Right.
it's just being maintained.
You got to pave the
So
road.
we have to make
Yeah.
sure exactly. You pave the road with the critical mass, and then you get the masses. Then you
Right.
get the large marches. Then you get the large demonstrations and all the
Hmm.
other things that happen. So just to talk about the questions that you asked, like how do we do this? Where do we go? I believe we start with the micro, focus on building up self-sufficiency and building up the empowerment and the belief in people that they can do for themselves. I remember when I was living in Guinea, a good friend of mine and I were watching a movie, and it was an African movie, and they had like houses that you would see like in the suburbs of Atlanta. Like I was like, okay, there's some nice houses, curated lawns and paved roads. And he was like, oh yeah, I know what it is. That's Cote d'Ivoire. And I was like, how do you know? He was like, well, I can tell by the infrastructure and how nice it is. And I was like,
Yeah.
why couldn't that be Guinea? And he was like, nah, that could never be Guinea. And I was like, and if you know where Cote d'Ivoire is from
Yeah.
Guinea, it's like you can throw a rock from,
Right.
especially where I lived in Guinea, to Cote d'Ivoire over the border.
Yeah.
And so for him to believe that something that happened in a country right next to
Right
ours
next door.
couldn't
Yeah.
be done in his,
Yeah.
it shows you the level of just how we accept the reality of, oh, this can never happen where I am, or it can never
Yeah.
happen in my lifetime. And when you speak those things, you are creating a self-fulfilled prophecy, because you believe it can't happen, you're not going to do anything toward it happening.
Hmm.
And
Exactly.
so
That's what I'm
really,
saying. It starts with the mind. That's why we have to condition, like, and that's why
mhm,
projects like how, you know what I mean, how we push for the community cleanup projects, things like that, because you have to have pride in your own community, even though you're poor. You know what I mean? You're
right,
not making a lot of money. You can't go afford to buy this and that. You take care of what you do have. You know what I mean? You can sew up those couple little holes, but you show up presentable. You don't just show up
mm,
like, well, I don't have this. I can't, I won't ever. No, you can carry yourself. You can have, build that self-esteem and wear it with confidence. You know what I mean? We have to have that. We have to show that amongst our people, with our belongings.
mhm,
You don't just because you don't have a lot that you just tear up what you do have. And you look at a lot of our communities and we see that we see how we don't have pride in our community sometimes. If you are in a neighborhood
yeah,
where they invest in cleaning up, you know what I mean, keeping it nice and clean. And a lot of times, you know, it is unfair because we see in some neighborhoods, the city, they are getting funds from the city. You know, they have more participation from the people in those neighborhoods who are making sure they have their potholes filled and their trash picked up more than once a week, you know. But and if you see a piece of trash in a neighborhood like that, that's nice and clean, you'll be more, you know, encouraged to pick up a piece of trash and go put it in the trash because like it looks out of place. But when you go to some of our
Right.
neighborhoods and you see trash all over the place, nobody's about to go pick up, you know, this and that piece of trash because like you look around, nobody has pride in this area. So it's like it doesn't
Even worse,
keep us. Mhm.
because they see the trash on the ground, they'll throw it down too.
Exactly. And you add into
And
it.
it's like, don't add to the mess.
Right.
Like, and it's just, it's something that we have to, like you said, we have to recondition ourselves because we have been conditioned to believe that the grass is greener on their side and not knowing that everything that they know they learned from us and then they just
For
retaught it to us with their spin on
exactly.
it. And
Exactly.
that's the thing, and that's one of the most important reasons that we need to know where we come from, who we are, why Sankofa
Mhm.
is important, looking
Mhm.
back to move forward, why we
Mhm.
need African unity, why we need the diaspora to come together and look at each other as one global African experience, global African perspective. And this is the reason that, you know, we went over the highlight reel and the Monday morning quarterback of the aftermath of independence. This is why I'm trying to hold back before I get more information about what's happening in Zimbabwe, because I don't know
Mhm.
what stranglehold they have on that president. I don't know
Mhm.
what's going on there because
Mhm.
I know from, you know, just seeing from what happened in the past, most of the time when things look fishy, is because there's some type of European puppetry happening and they have some type of hold over whoever is doing this disservice to our people. So
Exactly.
we will keep our eye out to see what's happening in Zimbabwe, and we will keep you guys updated
And if you
on.
are there, you know, I know I have some
Please
friends
let
from
us know.
Zimbabwe. If you are there and you're living it and you're seeing it firsthand, you know, because I was watching some news sources and you know, you get mixed information that
Hmm.
comes from people, some people trying to, you know, cover up things, and then you have some people that's like, you know, they're sharing old stories and this and that. So yeah, if you are in those areas or if you know, if you have anything to contribute to that, you know, like facts about it or something, then definitely let us know in the comments or
Right.
wherever.
Definitely. So we are going to stick with this theme of what's happening on the continent of Africa, even in our
Mhm.
deconstruction. Now, many of you have heard of this film series, and we're gonna break down the entire series because I just don't feel like going and giving each one of these movies their own day. So if you've heard of Madagascar, it's a DreamWorks production. It's a cartoon movie. You got Ben Stiller, Chris Rock, Jada Pinkett, and the guy from Friends, Ross.
Sasha
David
Baron
Schmidt.
Cohen, something like that.
And Said the entertainers in this movie too.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, okay, this is a cool name. Okay, Madagascar, they going to Africa in a movie. Finally, we going to Africa in the movie. Then the movie comes on, and it's about African animals in a zoo that are so happy to live in the zoo.
Right.
And then
And they,
you have the Chris Rock character who's a zebra who actually is longing to leave and like, is this my whole life? So
right.
things happen that they actually escape from the zoo and they end up being shipped to Africa, right?
Hmm.
And they get to Africa, and throughout the entire first movie, they're showing you all the worst parts of Africa. And they're just showing you how these animals who were in captivity can't wait to get back to the United States and get back to the zoo
Boy.
and get back to the cage. So we're gonna break down that first. That's the first movie. So
Yeah.
what were your thoughts when you first saw this movie? And upon rewatch, what are your thoughts?
I like to move it. Yes. I remember I was babysitting some kids and that's all they played. Oh my God. But yeah, that's what I thought about it first. But I thought that was so crazy. I did also, like you, I was excited to see, like, oh, Disney about to go to Africa, and was that was a Disney film, right? Was it?
It's DreamWorks.
DreamWorks, that's what I meant. DreamWorks, movie, cartoon in Africa and stuff, and Madagascar at that, because whoever talks about Madagascar, right?
Exactly.
it's like that little forgetting piece, that's a part of the continent, but kind of not really out of that. People forget about it. So, but yeah, I thought that was so crazy how I'm looking for it. Like, I'm like, are they going to incorporate some people from there? Like, is this going to be like a little bit of learning experience? Is it going to be like, oh, they're going to be happy to be, to be like, oh, I'm home, or at least I'm out of captivity. But like you said, it was so crazy to see. And this is just the first part, because it gets crazier even in the other two movies, how they are so determined to get back into in their little, in their captivity. Right?
So they start to show little elements of them actually being like, oh man, this is the thing that we saw in the zoo as a painting, and this is the real thing. So they show little elements of them appreciating being in Africa, and then right after the appreciation, something crazy would happen to make them miss New York again. And it was like the way they broke it down and depicted it. And so if I'm ruining your childhood for you, I apologize, but I can't not see these things when I watch television and media, because they present these things to us and we passively accept them, and we start to receive that information and we internalize it. And that goes back to the topic that we were talking about above. So we have to catch it, even when especially when it's in our children media. When it's in the child media, we have to catch it early. So you see people in New York, right? When they're at the zoo, people come visit the zoo.
Right.
Then when they stop off in Africa, no people to be found. They land on a beach.
Yeah, only the in the first one. You talking about just the first one?
In the first one,
I'm getting them all mixed up now. I'm trying to figure out, because I saw some people, but they were not people. They knocked out
the people who were taking them on the ship back to Africa, right? They knocked them out, and that's how they get diverted. But those were not African people. And then when they pop up on the shore of Africa, they just pop up on a shore that's on a beach that's uninhabited, and it's just forest, and it's all animals for the duration of the first movie. And then at the end of the movie, they think they're about to be rescued from freedom and taken back into captivity. They
rescued from freedom.
Right. They think they're about to be rescued, and then they say, oh man, we can take a detour. Let's go to Italy. Let's go to Paris. Let's go to, and they name everywhere but wow, Africa is a destination of somewhere that people want to be. And it was just interesting. So go into the second one. Back, what is it? Escape to Africa.
Yeah, that's when they land. Was that Kenya? I think they landed in Kenya, right?
So they thought they had left and went somewhere else.
They were supposed to go to, because the penguins took off with the plane or something, and they landed in Africa. They were supposed to be going to Monte Carlo. They were supposed to go to Monte Carlo, I think. And then they ended up dropping in Africa instead. Yeah, because that's when he met his dad.
I don't think that they went too far from where they originally were.
Yeah, because when you think about it, I mean, Madagascar is right there, and then you get, so I can see how they were flying across, and they ended up, I think it was Kenya, because I think it was like
so they were just back
Mount Kilimanjaro and stuff that they showed in there. But
so the lion, who is the main person or the main figure in the movie that wants to get back to the zoo. And this is the lion, the king of the jungle, the ferocious of everything, and just supposed to be the ruler. And they make him like the softest element of the movie. And doesn't appreciate any of the heritage or any of that. And throughout the second movie, they start to like break down how each one of them they first appreciate, oh man, I got connected with my mother and father, right? So the lion finds his parents, and then the zebra, for the first time in his life, sees other
Right.
zebras. The
Other
hippo sees
zebras.
other hippos. The giraffe sees other giraffes, and they feel like they belong. And then they start to slowly see how, you know, they've been so far indoctrinated into their colonization that they don't belong with their own kind. What was
Right.
your take on that?
I mean, yeah, of course, I think that was so crazy. And the fact that, like, meeting his father, and they come across the rites of passage, and they want to hand him down, hand the legacy, have him start off, just passing down the responsibility. And he don't want no parts. He like, I'm the king of New York. I'm going back to America. Take me back to the zoo. I belong in what is that? The Bronx Zoo, Brooklyn Zoo. I don't know,
They
whatever
still
zoo
in the
you got.
Central Park Zoo or something like that.
Central Park Zoo. Yeah, my bad. So many different parts. I don't know. Forgive me, I'm not from New York. I forgot. but
Right.
but yeah, it was so crazy. Like just that whole the cowardly lion. Like she said, like the lion in
Right.
Wizard of Oz is like the same. He's not even you don't have to be ferocious, but it's like have some pride in where you came from, or like, you don't want to be here with your own kind. And it was just kind of crazy. Like everybody else was having a good time. Like, oh, we belong here. Like it's other people like, well, other creatures like me. And but yeah, and
Right.
I also started thinking about, well, there would have been an opportunity to show people, because there are people, people who actually live in that part of the world.
Right.
actually
And
people that
so
live in that part of the world, right there, right out there
and so
with
we
them. But
see one and we
the
see some
tourists,
people.
right?
We see tourists and we see one African who's driving the safari.
Yeah, the
Wait,
safari. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and and they get lost because some penguins attack them, whatever, cartoon stuff. And
yeah.
then like, so it's just all these white people on a safari in Africa. Now they had to have been somewhere, like they had to be at a hotel or
Yeah.
something going on. What you hear the people saying is, "Oh, we're from the concrete jungle, so we can definitely make it in the jungle." And it's like them following this old elderly white woman who shows them how to survive in the wilderness after they lose their way from the truck. And it's like, okay, so the African dude is just
I
sitting
was about to
there,
say, what happened to him then? Why he
and
couldn't lead?
then
Like,
he's sitting right there in he did not anything. And then you got these New Yorkers bigging up New York the whole time and talking about how, primitive the place that they're in is. And it's like that also is rolling around in people's minds about what their view of Africa is. At no point do they show any African civilization, because the animals actually live on a reserve. So who created the reserve? Who put the
right,
fencing around
right.
the reserve?
And I know,
Who's
I didn't even think about that part. That definitely is, yeah.
and it's
And
just
again, like we know, like, I mean, I know when I went on a safari there, I mean, we actually crossed, well, went through the Maasai village. But however, I don't know if I would have preferred them to include them in a movie. Like, I don't know if they would have messed that part up. So I don't know if
and
I'm
that,
just so. But the
my
brother that was driving the truck, leading the safari, he could have definitely been the one to lead them through at least.
yeah, and my thing with that is they do so much harm by not including the people. I have
Yeah,
absolutely zero faith that if they had included people,
right.
that
That's what I'm
it would
saying.
have been depicted correctly. But all I'm
Right,
saying is, if you're going to do a movie in Africa, do your research. Just like we were
right.
talking about in the days previous of
Mm,
Black is King and Black Panther. What did they do when they went to Africa? They had consultants from that
yes,
place to represent the people in a way that was, respectable.
Yeah.
And how easy is that? It's not that difficult. They just have to pay some people. You have to
Yeah.
pay the people that you want to honor and respect, or just do a movie called Antarctica, or just deal with Australia animals. And I won't have no problem with it. But when
Right.
you come for my people, when you come for my people, then I got a problem with you. And when you
Right.
have these animals in the zoo, I can't help but see African Americans and saying that they want to go back into captivity. It
Mm-hmm.
it bothers me at my core. So there are limited representation of people in the second movie that is pretty much solely based in Africa. And then the people that they do show are mostly, Americans on a safari. And that's
Mm-hmm.
all they show of this is how people interact in Africa. They only come to see the animals. They even play at the beginning of the movie music from the National Geographic Explorer, and I always say when you see National Geographic come to Africa, they act like people don't exist. And so
Yeah.
they were, reverberating that same sentiment. So in the third movie, they go to Europe and end up in a circus.
In a circus, yeah.
And so the circus, of course, has people. And the circus, of course, goes to different places where people have money, and there's an economy, and there's a civilization, and there is, interaction, there's culture. But none of that existed in Africa.
I
What's your
know.
take?
Yeah, that was a big opportunity that they could have taken. Like, come on, DreamWorks, y'all need some
Right.
more people in that boardroom. And like,
They
who's
could have.
in the boardroom?
Yeah.
Like, what is the process? Because it was just like a skip over. Like, you had the opportunity to have people interacting, people from that region interacting. Like they did it in New York. You saw it in New York. You
Yep.
saw people coming to the zoo or wherever, in New York. And then you skip over Africa, and then now you're in Europe, and now you see more interaction with people. So it's like,
You
come
see
on, y'all. Y'all
all
could have
types.
done better than
I
that.
mean, as soon as they step foot in Europe, you see people.
Right.
You see people
I
everywhere,
wonder,
just
I
bustling
wonder
around.
though, were they thinking, like my brain is trying to, fill it in for me, or,
You're trying
maybe
to help
make
them out.
excuses for
You're
people.
trying to
Oh
throw
yeah,
them a
maybe.
lifeline.
Right. I'm trying to come up with something like, okay, maybe they didn't know. Maybe they were like, well, we don't want to offend anybody, so we don't want to get it
Nope.
wrong. I don't
You know what
know.
they
They
did?
could have called some professionals though. They could have
You know
asked
what
some
they
people
did?
to come
They built
in.
the Titanic and they only put on 6 lifeboats. So if they died,
Right.
it's their fault. It's their
Right.
fault that they
Right.
drowned because they
Yeah.
set themselves up. They put themselves in
Their
the middle of
budget
the
is
ocean
big
and
enough.
drowned. Their
Yeah,
budget
their
was
budget is
huge.
big enough to consult some people like, okay, how can we represent, what should we put, this and that. But yeah, but that's why the diversity matters, man. That's why, like, and especially those of us who are, because like I said, I was babysitting some children who, they were watching the movie. That's how I ended up seeing it. But
Mm-hmm.
it was like, just the fact that all of this entertainment, even though it's entertainment, it's still like the messages are still passively, being
Right.
hammered into these young minds. And it's like, even you can see a lot of times, people will be anxious, to get out of there. Like, no, I don't have an interest in going there. Like, no, this is better. And so, but I think that could have been a big opportunity for them to showcase Africa in an animated series, to
A lot of the times
make a
when we
positive
have
statement.
these a lot of the times when we have these divisive myths that exist in the African diaspora is
Mhm.
because it comes in like little nursery rhymes. It comes in little cartoon
Yes,
images. It comes
yes,
in little songs. And we can't always identify, like, why do I feel this way? Why do I have this
yeah,
information? Because it's
right,
so embedded in just the media that you've been fed, that
yeah,
because it rarely is just outright saying Africa is bad, don't
yeah,
like, because if you say that to people, they'll probably reject it or question it. But if you just over and over again just present to them that is unacceptable or undesirable, they'll
right,
usually take that in without questioning it.
right.
My brain just works differently.
Yeah,
So I
I
wanted to
want to
make sure.
do. Mhm, go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
finish. Okay, I just wanted to. I'm thinking about, like, I know there are, like, if you do a Google search or wherever, or just find the right sources, you can see, there are a lot of cartoonists, and what I mean, people who
Right.
do books, and what I mean, illustrators, all kind of stuff, who they do try to showcase, you know, like Africa in a positive light. I don't think it's that many though. I know I was looking
It's
for
not that
some.
many, and they don't have the backing, which is why
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. These bigger platforms could do a better job. But that's why, like, I think for those of us who do make it into those boardrooms, like, we have to go in there with that mindset. Like, let me take advantage of this platform I have. Let me take advantage of this budget that we can use, you know what I mean? And actually intentionally create some stuff for our children, because we know, even though we a lot of us like to say it's just entertainment, but we have to think critically about what we're allowing, especially for our children, because we do know, like, I'm still affected by Pocahontas. That was one of my, you know what I mean, my favorite childhood cartoon movies. And what else, a lot of other movies, but we don't think about, like, these ideas, the first ideas that we develop about people, about places,
right.
or, you know, certain things, they do shape our minds that early. So it's not just entertainment. We have to be, like, intentional.
And also, you were just saying there are many, because I know of Black comic books, I know of
Yeah,
Black graphic novels, I know of Black cartoons, I know, Black artists that are trying to get, more people to know about the work. This is why
right.
when we get a Disney that is producing a Black is King or producing a Black Panther, people can't be complaining saying Disney is getting money from it. We
Yeah,
need that
we
platform
need their
so that
platform.
people can see that it also sells,
Yes.
that makes money, so that they can go and get the independent artists, the
Yes.
independent cartoonists, and actually put money behind it so it can be produced, so that these capitalists know that we're going to support it.
Right. Because
And
we
that's
can use
how
their
this whole
tools. We can
thing.
use the tools to accomplish what we need to, you know, to get done. And yeah,
Exactly.
we just got to be smart about it.
How
Because I
we
think a
get
lot
to
of
the next.
times, yeah, I think a lot of time, like in business period, you can look at whatever industry, and a lot of times, because we'll feel like, oh, we finally made it once we get a position in that room, you know, in that space. But we have to think, it's okay, the work is not done. Yeah, I made it here, you know, but the work is not done. I have to intentionally build this or that using these tools, using this platform that I now have. And that's how we'll be able to, you know, to make some change, some actual change happen. But yeah, we can't be overly
Right.
critical about, like, well, you know, what they did with Black Panther. Like, well, it don't matter if you went to go see it 6 times in the movie theater. The white folks still got your money. You know, it's not like, okay, but it's showing
Bro,
how
what
much
you
we
just showed
support.
them,
How, yeah, because
showed them
people
the
do want to see it.
value
We
in
do want to
making
see
more
it,
Black productions.
right?
Right.
Because it'll allow more
That's what
opportunities to
keeps.
present more material like that.
So, speaking of that, let's talk about our For the Culture segment for the day. And we're going to talk about Black Hollywood. So, the
All
reason
right.
that this got brought to my attention is because this morning I watched a trailer to a movie called Judas and the Black Messiah. And it's the
Oh
story
yes,
of,
I just saw that.
okay, yeah. So, it's the story of Fred
Mhm.
Hampton, right? And so I watched the trailer, then I watched somebody do a review on the trailer.
Okay.
A Black YouTuber who does movie reviews, and he brought up this topic that I thought, well, I didn't think it had been settled, but it was just interesting that he was so adamant about not liking this movie.
Mm.
And let me tell you why. He doesn't like the movie because Daniel Kaluuya is playing Fred Hampton, and he's
Oh
not
Lord. Okay, I get
an
it. I get
African
this.
American.
Yeah. Okay.
And he believed that because Lakeith Stanfield is an African American, that by
He should
them
have.
making Lakeith Stanfield be like the Judas character, the traitor, and having Daniel Kaluuya play Fred Hampton, but he's not
Mm.
African American, that there's some issue with that. Now,
Mm.
I heard Samuel L. Jackson come out a couple of years ago. No, it was like last year, where he
Uh-huh.
was stating that a lot of British actors are getting, roles in
Black
Hollywood.
American role. Hmm.
So, what are your thoughts on that? And then I'll come up on the rear because I have a lot.
Yeah,
You
I
go
mean,
ahead.
I definitely heard that argument. I already knew when you started talking about it, what this reviewer was talking about. But I heard the same thing when it came to, the Harriet Tubman story. And the sister did a beautiful job. You know what I mean, doing that. She took the role very seriously. And at the end of the day, it is an art form, acting, is an art form. And there have been plenty of Black Americans getting roles of other Black people in outside of America. And you know what I mean? We don't think the same when it's us doing it. We're like, oh yeah, they can do it. We don't even think about it. It's like, oh, yeah. Was that Forrest Whitaker played Mandela? Who was that played Mandela?
No,
Somebody.
Morgan Freeman played Mandela. Forrest Whitaker played Idi Amin.
Oh, true. Okay, I knew it was someone. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, it's been several others as well playing, other Blacks outside of other African people outside of America, and we American, we don't tend to have that same attitude when it's us doing it. And so, yeah, I think that was just a little petty. I think like he can still accomplish that, accomplish the same goal. And at the end of the day, like I said, it is art. They're actors. And so yeah, it shouldn't. I don't think it should be a big deal like that.
If you told me that because John Boyega, Idris Elba, and Daniel Kaluuya and Cynthia Erivo, because they're working, there are no jobs for a Mahershala Ali, a name a Chadwick Boseman, a Denzel. He's not getting roles anymore. Samuel Jackson is in a movie every 2 days,
right?
And like he ain't losing no jobs.
Yeah.
And okay, so we got somebody in the comments saying Cynthia Erivo and Harriet wasn't it. That's
and I firmly disagree with you, so, brother. Like, I'm sorry. I don't agree. She did a beautiful job. I'm gonna stand up for her because she did a beautiful job in that movie.
I think acting, she did a great job in Harriet. But I did have issues with Harriet, but we'll break that down on another day.
Right.
I'm gonna do Harriet as a deconstructed, and we'll talk about the issues I had with Harriet as a film. But Cynthia Erivo in the role, I didn't have anything wrong with like her portrayal of Harriet and the way that she was directed. But the thing is, I just don't see it as a conflict. And I, like we were just talking about earlier, of creating these minor divisions amongst ourselves. Like, how is this helping anything? How is this conversation advancing Black people? Like, okay, we don't want other people, other Black people. It's not like they got blackface on. It's not like
I'm about to say they ain't even in blackface.
Elizabeth Taylor playing playing Cleopatra.
Right.
It's not that. We're talking about a Black person who is a child of the diaspora, probably a child of the transatlantic experience.
Right.
And we talked about earlier today how Marcus Garvey from Jamaica came to America, inspired the largest mass of American people to this day, also inspired people in Africa, also inspired much of the Black Power movement that readopted that red, black, and green. So we got Jamaica, we got Ghana, we got the United States, all in formation of the same influence. And we're making petty little disagreements about somebody playing a character and giving telling a story that needs to be told.
That was too. Okay, let me see. Okay, put up that comment. Let's see. Okay, I need to see it. She made Harriet seem too spooky and scary instead of determined and strategic.
That wasn't that was the direction.
Yeah, that was like the role. You had to follow the role, right? I think, like that's, I don't think she took that, like the actor took it to create another story. That could have been in the writing, or some.
I understand what you're saying. They made her all mystical and magical. They almost made her like a mutant, Like she had
Well,
superpowers.
because I think they really emphasize that whole thing, you know, which we've heard, you know, that she would have these visions. And
Right.
so it was kind of, but it's a Hollywood production. It wasn't a
Exactly.
documentary film. It was a Hollywood production. And the stories still need to be told. And you can, if you really want to get like to the, you know, the straight raw story, and like, you know what I mean, you want to be so straight on it, you can literally go and watch documentaries that have been produced by people for the real, you know,
Right. It's plenty.
unfiltered story, because this
Make it a movie. I do
right
have my gripes with the film, but they
right
did have to make it a movie. That's not one of my gripes. I liked
right
that part because, like, if you know anything about African people, we are a spiritual people, and they were
right
just, you know, accentuating
yeah
that kind of mode of how we spiritually were connected with
right
even the cosmos, and how that helped to guide us to our
mm-hmm.
freedom. So that part
And
right
you were
there,
asking, and you were asking even about like when we were talking about George Washington Carver, and it's like, where did this brother get this knowledge from?
right.
And it's like
Where did he
sometimes
get
that
that
it
knowledge?
can be magical. Sometimes it is like a divine intervention. You know what I mean? But a lot of us, I think that's also maybe a disconnect with how we relate. You know what I mean,
Right.
to these
When you
to
look
these
at African spiritual practices, I'm talking about
right
traditional African, or the
right
way we adopt other people's religions. If you look at the way Black people practice Christianity, the way that Black people do Islam, we do it different, and we bring a little bit more soul into it, into
yes
our, you know, presentation of it. We believe in that mystical power of, you know, the creator and all those
right.
things, because I truly believe, where did George Washington Carver get that information?
I'm telling you.
Where
But
did
he said,
Benjamin
no, no,
Banneker
no.
get that
I
information?
I literally just watched a documentary on George Washington Carver. Another piece. I saw one before, but I was just watching one, and he had these same types of visions that Harriet Tubman said that she had. You know what I mean? He said that he would go out in nature, and he would ask, you know, he would ask the
Right. He would
creator or
talk to
the
the
whoever.
plant. Yeah.
Yes, he said that he would just go out there and sit in nature and
And they would
ask,
talk to
what
him.
do I need to do? What can I learn from this? How can I pull from this? What can I create with this? And that's how he would get his answers. That was
Right.
literally a part of, this is his words. This is
Mm-hmm.
him defining, saying that this was Harriet Tubman was, you know, because she didn't die until what, 1913. Like, you act like
Mm-hmm.
people couldn't actually talk to these people and find out, you know, like what they went through and what they were thinking, what they experienced. She
Right.
literally was, she said that she would have these visions that drove her, you know, but let's see, is that what he was saying? He said not the premonitions, but the facial expressions and delivery. Okay, I mean, well, I guess that's maybe that's your opinion, that's your criticism of her acting skills, or you know,
That's just
whatever.
her
I'm gonna
acting.
still stick by the sister, and
But
Cynthia, you did a beautiful
look,
job.
the performance was on point. The performance was on point. I'm not gonna sit here and
Yeah,
down the performance, but the point
right.
is, I think we have enough space for everybody. And what's
Yeah,
wonderful is we have so many Black roles that they're
yeah,
going to different people. We as African Americans, we have access to Hollywood, right? So we live here. We have that little bit of privilege, and so, and I do see where people are saying they are going after the European trained actors because they feel like they're more polished and more trained. They even are doing that with, you know, white actors, where they're going to
yeah.
Europe more so than just other people. So
And,
I
and
think we need to make sure. I think we need to make sure that we aren't just grabbing on to little bitty distinctions
right,
that don't advance the conversation or don't
right.
advance our people.
And
Because
I
go
oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I was just gonna ask, like, how do we know how often this is being practiced outside of Black people? Like, what if this is not just a, you know, it doesn't have to just be like
Right.
I mean, I can understand that people have an issue with it, because it's like, okay, well, now we're just now starting to get all these empowering stories, you know, about, and tell these different tales about Black people, and we do want to, you know, to see our people in these roles and stuff like that, but it could also be happening a lot you know, for a lot of other people too. And I mean,
Mhm.
that's also something to consider. But like we talked about Black Panther and how we can have a little room for imagination or room for error
Mhm.
and this and that. The thing about it is that we need so many more examples.
Right.
We need a lot more movies so we don't have to pick apart every little thing about, you know, this one or two that pop up every 2 or 3 years.
And that's the wonderful thing of having people like Tyler Perry and Jordan Peele and Ava DuVernay and all these other creators that are not only just creating films and writing scripts, but creating platforms like TV series and offering a variety of opportunities for so many
Yeah.
people to be able to get into the industry, because I do believe there is space for everybody, and
Mm-hmm.
there is room for us to tell each other's stories. I'm not going to sneeze at um what somebody I wouldn't sneeze at Angela Bassett playing a Jamaican.
Right.
I
Right.
wouldn't be conflicted if Lupita played somebody from South Carolina. Like, I
Yeah.
just want the story told. And
Right.
if it's told good and it's represented and giving Black people an opportunity to see ourselves on screen, because we keep falling into their arbitrary borders. They created those borders for us.
Yeah.
They don't
Right.
really exist.
Right.
Like, we are one people. That pan-African experience, that global African perspective needs to be on top of every other thing. Let's control our own narrative. Don't let them divide us on silly stuff. This is silliness. We just talked about all the stuff that we fought through, from what's happening in Zimbabwe right now to them like forcibly demanding $3.5 billion from a country that can barely, afford to take care of their own economy. And
Right.
then we talked about how Haiti and all these former French colonies in Africa are being pillaged annually from owing money for their own independence to the person that they got the independence from, that they wanted from. Those are real issues that we need to be talking about. And we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about confrontation, about representation in Hollywood and who's
Right.
getting what job, but there are jobs for everybody. Like, I keep seeing new, Black actors pop up. Like, I saw a slew of people in that Issa Rae movie with Lakeith Stanfield, The
Mm-hmm.
Photograph. I saw all
Okay.
types of new Black actors that I was unfamiliar with. I saw all types of people in and what was that movie that came out last year? Blind Spotting, in The Hate You Give, and on
Mm.
TV with The Shy, on
Mm-hmm.
TV with the Ava DuVernay show. I can't remember the name of it.
Sugar
Um,
Queen Sugar. Was
Queen
it one of them?
Sugar. Like, there
Mm-hmm.
are opportunities that are being made for us. We're
Right.
having them. And the thing is, there is room for everybody to advance and grow, because we need the UK Black people to identify
Mm-hmm.
with us and create
Yes.
opportunities for us, and not balk at us for playing some UK
Because
Black
boy,
historical
we know
figure.
how
Like,
to separate ourselves though. We know how to separate
we
ourselves
are
amongst, you know,
talented at
other
that.
folks. I'm telling you, we will be so critical. And it's like, dang, y'all, like, because it's not even like okay, well, you didn't play that role good enough. And I think so and so would have because she's from that area or that's part of her legacy. But it's
Yeah.
like, dang, you make people not even want to connect with, you know what I mean? Like, they're people petty. We don't even know
And I
who
was
want to.
surprised to even hear that sentiment come from Samuel L. Jackson. As many roles as he gets, first of all, so he's not losing out on any work. And then, like we said, we had Morgan Freeman play Mandela. We had Forrest Whitaker play Idi Amin. We've had other people play African Americans play Africans. We've
Right.
had Africans come over here and intermingle with us in certain roles. And we've
Yeah.
had these things so much that we are, and this is like a new, remember the 90s? It was almost like so many Black directors and so many Black films came out. And then we went through like a dark age in like the 2000s. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
like Love and Basketball was toward like the late 90s, early 2000s, whenever that came out. But it was like one of the last of those films that were coming out in that boom of black films in the 90s.
Yeah.
We're
The
getting back to
Wood
that
and the
boom in
Brothers
Hollywood,
and all
right?
that stuff. Yeah.
It was almost like so many of them, whether it was
Right.
romantic comedies or dramas.
Exactly. It was a
You had
variety.
soul food.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was everything. So now we're getting back to that place, and now we're even more conscious of, you know, the representation that is offered on screen, which is so important that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, now we make sure that we have black directors, we have black you know, people doing the music, we have
Mm-hmm.
black people in all aspects of the industry, making sure that we have a stronghold and we represent ourselves. Because you'll have a movie that's directed by a black person but written by somebody else, and it's a
Right.
misrepresentation of it.
Right.
And you know, so I just want to make sure that we are honing in on these dialogues. And I'm not saying that the Black Hollywood conversation isn't important. It's
Yeah.
important because our representation is important. I just think that we could have a better conversation than who is allowed to play what role. Because what the guy was saying about Daniel Kaluuya playing, about him playing Fred Hampton, he was saying it was disrespectful for him to play Fred Hampton. And I was like, so long as he is honoring the memory of Fred Hampton and
Right.
portraying him
How
as
was that
the
disrespectful?
strong positive figure that he was, how is it disrespectful? And I'm actually going to try to reach out to him. I want to talk to him.
Yeah, because
um
I'm
so
interested to
I'm gonna
know.
see if
I
he,
think, yeah, I'm because I think a lot, like we just said, a lot of people do want to just pick bones. Like, I don't get why these things are such an issue. I would be interested to hear why he thinks it's disrespectful. Are because a lot of times you see people have the same opinion or a similar opinion. People are just itching to say something about everything, and because we get a whole overflow of opinions, of public opinions nowadays via social media or whatever
mm-hmm,
platforms
yeah,
you're using. So I'm interested to know, like, people who do have an issue with it, like a genuine issue, and think that is disrespectful. I would love to know why you think it's so disrespectful,
I
because they're
think it's
not playing
room,
a disrespectful role. They're not,
right.
they're not like dishonoring these people in the roles. It's just they're simply doing their job as actors to play these roles. So yeah, I
I
want to
think
know
it's
what the
room to
issue is.
have this as a full conversation.
Oh
We need
yes,
to expand this one out. We'll come back. This will not be our final time talking about this, because
right.
I'm gonna go and dig up so many, you know, I'm gonna get all my thoughts together. I'm gonna have
Yep.
all my facts, and I'm gonna make sure that we have enough representation, and that,
Hmm.
you know, we invite. I want to invite some guests on here with us who
Right.
have the opposing view, and just see where we go. But we're
Oh,
going
for
to
sure.
always model how to have conversations. We don't talk
Hmm.
at each other, we talk to one another. We don't
Yep.
come on here to argue, we come on here to converse. We come on here
Hmm.
to get understanding about why you are, to get an understanding about why you may feel this way, but to also be, you know, open and flexible enough to receive new information and new ways to see and think about things.
Right.
So again, this has been a wonderful episode, and I want to make sure that you guys know how to get in touch with African Unity Initiative. How do we actualize this African unity? We are always engaged in our Bringing the Neighbor Back to the Hood campaign. Though coronavirus is happening, we will be doing our virtual community assessment meetings. They will start probably sometime toward the end of this month of August on into the beginning of September, where we will be doing monthly meetings trying to figure out how do we do community and economic development in a post-COVID world, in a, you know, in a world during COVID, so that we
Right.
don't lose our momentum. You can always get in touch with us and see all the things that we have going on at africanunity.us. You can also follow us on social media at African Unity. Um, and Michelee, where can you
Hmm.
be found?
Yeah, you can find me at Michelee the Maker on my social media, and yeah, we can communicate there. But yeah, I'm interested. I'm definitely I'm interested in hearing other people's
I'm,
thoughts and
I'm hyped.
opinions.
Yeah, I'm
Oh
hyped.
yeah.
So go into the comment sections. Go into the comment
Yeah.
sections. Leave your thoughts. Be positive, but be clear. Be concise with what your points are. And you know, we'll be in there and we'll respond. And we
Right.
love you
And,
guys.
and
I
stay
want
safe,
to
please. Still, yeah, demand justice for Breonna Taylor. Absolutely. And let's
definitely
stay safe out there. We
always
still, don't let up. I know people think that it's all over and stuff, but
it's not
don't let up.
over.
But
Wear
keep,
your face
yes,
tags.
yes,
Make sure
keep
that you
stay
go
safe out
vote.
there.
Don't
Hmm.
turn protection against a disease into a political issue. This is
Yes, please.
public health. This
It
is
is
safety
health.
for everybody. Okay.
Right. This is not
So
political. Okay.
look out for your brother. Wear your mask. Wear your face
Yes.
coverings. Wash your hands, which shouldn't be something you
Yes.
have to tell the grown people.
Right.
Clearly, it is.
Take your
And
herbs.
so
Take
just
your
take care of
herbs or
yourselves.
whatever you need to do. Mm-hmm.
Have a wonderful weekend. You'll see us again on next Tuesday,
Yes.
and we will see you guys on the next run.
Have a
Peace.
good weekend.